Another guest arriving for the gala ball is Princess Grace of Monaco.
Grace Kelly, Her Serene Highness Princess Grace of Monaco. Grace Kelly is one of the most admired and iconic women in the world. She is forever remembered as a standard of beauty, style, and grace. From Hollywood starlet to princess consort, Grace's life is truly like no other.
Grace Kelly of Philadelphia and Hollywood stepped aboard the Deo Gigante from the liner Constitution, which carried her across the Atlantic. A picture queen who will become a princess greets her new subjects and is greeted by them in turn.
Poised, reserved, supremely elegant, in short, royalty. Grace Kelly grew up in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to an athletic, affluent, and influential Irish family. She spent her childhood surrounded by her siblings. The family had 4 children. Peggy, the eldest, was the father's favorite. John Jr., the only son, Elizabeth, Lizanne, the youngest, and Grace, who always stayed in the background and seemed to be a shy girl. Both Grace's parents came from a sporting background. Her mother, Margaret, was the first coach of women's teams at the University of Pennsylvania, whilst her father, John, was a triple Olympic champion. Following in their father's footsteps, Grace's brother, John Jr., took up rowing, competing in 4 Olympic Games. Uninterested in sports, Kelly was determined to forge her own path. In 1940, inspired by a Russian ballet performance, Kelly began taking dance lessons, as her first dream was to become a ballerina. However, she was unsuitable due to her height, but determined to follow a different path to her athletic family. She turned her dreams in a new direction. She decided she wanted to become an actress at a young age and studied acting, primarily theater, at New York City's American Academy of Dramatic Arts. Kelly's dreams of becoming an actress were met with disapproval by her father, John B. Kelly Sr. He had decidedly old-fashioned views about the vulgarity of the stage and screen, despite the success of his brothers, actor and vaudeville comedian Walter C. Kelly and George Kelly, director and playwright. She almost didn't make it into the academy as the school had already filled all available openings. But Kelly's Uncle George stepped in to urge them to accept her. After auditioning with the scene from her uncle's play, The Torchbearers, Kelly managed to secure herself a place in the prestigious academy. Following her graduation, her Uncle George continued to advise and mentor Kelly throughout her acting career. She has a reputation for being ladylike and proper, and she didn't get it by sitting around. Instead, Kelly had to take lessons to rid herself of her Philadelphia accent. While at acting school, her instructors suggested she work on her voice and delivery, so she did. Kelly used a tape recorder to help herself, and as a result, her speech started hinting at a British accent, measured and well-rounded. Kelly worked as a stage actress and model before moving to Hollywood. At her father's insistence, she lived at the Barbizon Hotel for Women in Manhattan. She was hired as a model, and some of her first modeling jobs were commercials for bug spray and cigarettes. Kelly had stated that the 3 years she spent at the Barbizon Hotel were precious memories. Her fellow residents knew Kelly as an outgoing and confident individual, which was very different from how she grew up. Kelly's start in the industry was slow. However, by 1953, she had secured supporting roles in her first big Hollywood films. Her mother, Margaret Major Kelly, stated that Kelly was the shyest family member, often overshadowed by her extroverted siblings. Her family and friends, who never thought of her as being anywhere near movie star material, were stunned when they saw her on the big screen for the first time. Throughout her adult life, Kelly was frequently described as one of the most beautiful women in the world. But she wasn't considered particularly attractive in her younger years, even after landing some work as a model. Kelly's start in the film industry was slow. Although her films were successful, her performances were often reviewed as unexciting by critics. Alfred Hitchcock described her early performance in High Noon as rather mousy and lacking animation, claiming that it was only in her later films that she really blossomed and showed her true star quality.
That man downstairs, the clerk, he said things about you and Will. I've been trying to understand why he wouldn't go with me, and now all I can think of is that it's got to be because of you.
What do you want from me?
Let him go. He still has a chance. Let him go.
I cannot help you.
Please.
He isn't staying for me.
She had many award nominations, including in 1956 when she won the Golden Globe's Henrietta Award for World Film Favorites. Her performance in The Country Girl was nominated and ultimately won the Academy Award for Best Actress.
The thrill of this moment keeps me from saying what I really feel. I can only say thank you with all my heart to all who made this possible for me. Thank you.
Even after Kelly's success, it never quite brought her father around. After winning her Oscar, her father supposedly said he thought her older sister Peggy would succeed. Kelly remained in the public eye for most of her life and firmly caught the media's attention, of which she remarked with typical humor and grace. The freedom of the press works in such a way that there is not much freedom from it. Kelly was one of the highest paid and most respected actresses in the world at this point in her career. In the spring of 1955, Kelly was asked to join the United States Delegation Committee at the Cannes Film Festival in France. While on the train to France, Kelly met Olivia de Havilland and her newlywed husband, Pierre Galante, an editor at Paris Match magazine. They immediately suggested introducing Kelly with a young Prince of Monaco. She immediately agreed, but made the highly professional proviso that such a meeting must first be approved of by the studio sponsoring her visit to Cannes. Although this meeting didn't go as smoothly as intended, with issues of timing for the meeting and labor strikes shutting down the city's electricity, when she finally arrived at the palace, the delay caused her to miss the prince. So instead, Kelly was given a tour of the palace without him. Thankfully, the prince arrived before Kelly had to leave, and Prince Rainier III of Monaco decided to give her a tour of his gardens. The two walked ahead of their entourages, chatting with one another in his garden, while Paris March documented the meeting in photographs. Prince Rainier was seeking a bride at the time. After this brief encounter, he had his heart set on this American actress.
The sovereign principality of Monaco, 2 miles long and half a mile wide. Its government dominated by the royal palace of Prince Rainier. Its income derived from tourist attractions like the casino and the luxury hotels, a strange combination of commerce and cloud cuckoo land. Once a year, the main city, Monte Carlo, becomes the center for the greatest motor rally of them all. But Roving Report this week is more interested in royalty than rallies, and our car took the road to the palace. The palace of the Princes of Monaco has stood on this spot for nearly 800 years. Their family, the Grimaldis, came originally from Genoa.
The Monegasque royal family is unlike any other royal family in the world. Founded in 1160 by Grimaldo Canella in Genoa, the House of Grimaldi became the ruling house when Francesco Grimaldi captured Monaco in 1297. Whilst most royal families are descendants of major sovereigns, the Principality of Monaco isn't. Instead, the princes of Monaco married French and Genesee nobles. Whilst other royal nations attracted visitors through their cultural values, Monaco was attractive for a different reason. The Casino de Monte Carlo. Opening in July 1865, the casino created an influx of punters looking to take their chance to win big. Unlike other royal nations, Monaco was seen as a gambling haven, famous for its Les Belugues district, or Den of Thieves, known today as Monte Carlo. Although this brought the principality money, it wasn't necessarily a good look.
Monte Carlo is nearby. This gambling casino is actually part of the Principality of Monaco, an independent state with its own rulers and its own laws. It is interesting to know that none of the citizens pays any taxes in this small but prosperous community. It is also interesting to know that none of the citizens of Monaco is allowed to gamble in the casino, only visitors.
Other royal circles looked down on the principality for its lack of sovereignty and tainted image. They never intermarried with the other royal and princely houses, let alone the major royal dynasties. This wasn't helped when in the 1950s, whilst other monarchs and their heirs were still marrying royals, the reigning Prince of Monaco had his heart set on the American actress. While both Rainier and Kelly were already under such a microscope because of their public personalities, the instant attraction between them was undeniable. The prince once described his perfect bride with long hair floating in the wind, the color of autumn leaves. Her eyes are blue or violet, with flecks of gold. They struck up a courtship, and even after Kelly returned to the United States, she and Rainier would correspond continuously. Luckily, they didn't have to deal with long distance for long. Rainier had a diplomatic tour that brought him to the U.S., where he met with Kelly and her family. 3 days later, he proposed. The press glamorized their courtship, depicting it as a true fairy tale romance.
Getting married is a very big step for any girl, and of course, I have a great many feelings about that, and it's a very exciting thing, and I'm very, very happy. Of course, I'm a little sad to be leaving home, but I hope to be back quite often.
But things aren't so simple when you're marrying a prince. Before Kelly was allowed to marry Prince Rainier, her family had to seal the deal by paying a dowry. Although her family were unhappy with this tradition, half of the money came out of the inheritance that Kelly should have received when her parents eventually passed. Kelly paid the other half of the $2 million herself. Kelly had a couple of other things to do before she could join the royal family of Monaco. The first being that she had to renounce her American citizenship. The second was that Kelly had to take a fertility test. The royal family needed to be sure that she could give the prince an heir. If he didn't produce an heir, Monaco would become part of France.
The more unfortunate members of the press won't have an opportunity to go to Monaco for your wedding. Will we have an opportunity to see your gown before you sail?
No, I think what we're planning to do is release a sketch of my gown the day of the wedding.
Prince Rainier's yacht bears his betrothed in triumph into the harbor at Monaco. A few hours earlier, Grace Kelly of Philadelphia and Hollywood stepped aboard the Deo Gigante from the liner Constitution, which carried her across the Atlantic. A picture queen who will become a princess greets her new subjects and is greeted by them in turn as she goes ashore to a tumultuous welcome. The little postcard principality wears its heart on its sleeve, its feelings expressed by two small monegasques offering flowers. From far or near, all eyes are on this old world city and its bachelor prince, who wooed and won him a leap year bride in the new world. Through streets decked with American and Monacan flags, he whisks her off to his pink and white castle on the eve of the wedding of the year.
After marrying Prince Rainier on April 19, 1956, in a very public and ornate ceremony, Kelly became Her Serene Highness, Princess Grace of Monaco. The Napoleonic Code of Monaco and the laws of the Catholic Church necessitated two ceremonies, both a civil ceremony and a religious wedding. The wedding between Kelly and Prince Rainier was a grand affair, to say the least, and the people of Monaco were ecstatic. Thousands of them lined the streets to greet their new 26-year-old princess following the nuptials, a day no one would forget. The wedding was called the Wedding of the Century and is still considered one of the most beautiful weddings ever.
Voulez-vous prendre pour légitime épouse Grâce Patricia, ici présente, selon le rite de notre mère, la Sainte Église. Grâce Patricia, voulez-vous prendre pour légitime époux Rainier, Louis, Henri, Maxence, Bertrand, ici présent, selon le rite de notre mère, la Sainte Église. Ego conjugum vos in matrimonium, in nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Kelly's wedding gown was designed by MGM costume designer Helen Rose, who had previously dressed her in high society and the Swan. It was the most expensive dress that Rose had ever made. The dress consisted of a rounded collar, a full skirt of smooth, finely ribbed ivory satin, and a fitted bodice made from Brussels lace, embroidered with seed pearls. The lace was over a century old and had floral designs in it. 25 yards of silk taffeta and 100 yards of silk net were used in the construction of the dress.
Worldwide interest, the old world and the new were joined in a union which Monegasques hoped would found a new dynasty for the principality.
Despite the public popularity, not a single crowned head attended the marriage, synonymous with their status within royal circles. However, it wouldn't take long for the newly crowned princess to change everything. Being a Hollywood actress, Kelly naturally attracted crowds. Hotel bookings and tourist revenues increased spectacularly in the build-up to what was dubbed the wedding of the century. Determined to change the image of the principality, Grace made changes immediately, putting an end to the tir aux pigeons, an annual pigeon shoot, and taking up presidential roles in charities. By 1961, the attraction was no longer Monte Carlo or the casinos, but the export Princess of Monaco that was Grace Kelly. Five years after the wedding of the century, Monaco's business turnover had reached $128 million, a 400% increase in 10 years.
For many years now, Monte Carlo has been a rich men's playground, catering for the fashionable society of Europe. At one of the biggest and most luxurious hotels in the Principality, Reginald Bosanquet spoke to the manager.
We sincerely hope that English clientele will come down very soon to enjoy this small paradise.
Is it very expensive to spend a holiday in Monte Carlo?
Well, of course, it is a bit expensive, but you get some facilities because we have a certain difference of prices in very good places. And of course, people can come at the Hotel de Paris, which is the most expensive, but they can go to other places which are very reasonable and enjoy just as well their holidays.
If there are not so many English coming now, who's taking their place?
Well, some Italians have chosen the Monte Carlo as one of their most pleasant rendezvous.
Do people come here mainly to gamble, do you think?
Well, some people come for gamble, but some people come for rest and fun.
In her last feature film before her marriage, High Society, her character is seen wearing a large ring in the film. The ring just happened to be Kelly's real-life engagement ring from Prince Rainier. Set on a platinum band, the emerald-cut diamond was 10.47 carats. Kelly abandoned her acting career in order to become Princess Consort of Monaco. Director Alfred Hitchcock, who had become one of Kelly's mentors during the last years of her career, hoped that Kelly would appear in more of his films, which required an icy blonde lead actress. But even he was unable to coax her out of retirement. Allegedly, Hitchcock planned to use 1962's Marnie as Kelly's big comeback to the silver screen, and the princess agreed to take the part. In March 1962, Monaco's palace spokesman announced that Princess Grace would play the role, then give up acting altogether.
Her Serene Highness Princess Grace of Monaco, formerly Miss Grace Kelly of Philadelphia and Hollywood. A domestic bombshell which gave fuel to the Monegasque rumor factory was the announcement that Princess Grace was to become a film actress once again for Alfred Hitchcock. But the princess continues to live up to her title of Serene Highness with an endless and energetic round of social and official duties. And her husband has emphasized that her film this summer will not be allowed to interfere with her family and official obligations.
The citizens of Monaco were not so keen on having their princess return to the movies. The local press blasted the idea of Kelly making a screen comeback, and France's President Charles de Gaulle supposedly pressured Prince Rainier to pull his wife out of the production for fear it would make Monaco appear frivolous. In April, Kelly announced that she was withdrawing from the production, ostensibly due to the scheduling difficulties. This wouldn't be the last time Kelly faced the anti-American French president. Having established the principality as a playground for the rich and famous, Kelly and Prince Rainier had transformed Monaco.
A continental holiday would be incomplete without at least a few days spent along the French Riviera. An international playground, this coastline along the blue Mediterranean has become the Mecca for those who have been captivated by its charms. For pleasurable bathing, the warm waters of the sea are rivaled only by the brilliance of the sunshine, which bestows an amber luster to such objects as overexpose themselves.
What was once an attraction for gamblers and partygoers was now being used as a tax haven and holiday destination for the world's elite. Monaco saw a huge influx of tax refugees after the publicity of the royal wedding, despite the policy being in place since 1869. This infuriated de Gaulle as French citizens began taking residence in Monaco to avoid paying income tax in France.
About 100 years ago, Charles III, the hereditary Prince of Monaco, had the brainwave of a lifetime, the game of roulette. He built the town of Monte Carlo across the harbor behind me for rich men to come and play it in, and he made his little country prosperous for life. Or so it seemed. Then 12 months ago, Charles de Gaulle, President of France, threatened to ruin Monaco's prosperity when he announced the end of the Treaty of Friendship linking the two countries. Well, the 12 months since then have been a frustrating and an anxious time for the citizens of Monaco, most of whom are Frenchmen anyway. Frustrating because of France's constant threats to cut things like power and water supplies, and because of the antics of the French customs men, who keep bobbing up at the so-called frontier and putting their silly questions to everybody. Hostility is something the natives of Monaco, the Monegasques, haven't known for centuries. To belittle to stop de Gaulle taking over the fortified rock with its palace where Prince Rainier's family have ruled for 700 years. The National Guard has a total strength of only 90. So there was anxiety when de Gaulle declared that in return for French protection, Monaco must pay French taxes for the first time in history.
Your Highness, to what extent is your personal future at stake in this dispute with France?
Oh, well, my personal future is linked completely with the destiny of this country. Of course, if things went badly for the Principality, they would go worse for myself.
That means to say that you could ultimately have to give up.
Yes, I'm not thinking of that at all, but it would probably happen.
I'm sure you're not. From all I've seen of your statements, there's a great deal of fight left in you. What would you say is the ultimate objective of France in this dispute?
I don't know, really.
Why should
I can't feel it's a personal satisfaction to do away with the Principality, because I don't think it's really the interest of France to do so. The present situation is certainly very interesting for the French government, so much so that the French Finance Ministry have always stated that they were not demanding this alignment of the fiscal system. I don't think we'd ever be able to accept taxation for people. But as far as companies go, I do think that we could find, it's probably necessary that we should find our own taxation system for companies. Of course, with a rate which would be lower than in other countries, especially in France, so that we still conserve a privilege, because after all, it's all we have to attract people here.
Yes, if you made it anything like France's, then you'd lose all the advantages you have from your Economic Development Corporation.
Yes, completely.
Why do you feel justified in continuing this exemption from personal tax for people? Because all over Europe, everybody pays individual income tax, with very few exceptions.
Well, because I think basically, if we didn't, many people wouldn't come here. And I think many companies, even if they had a high taxation on the company, if there was taxation on people, they wouldn't install their companies here. Because after all, it's interesting for them to have their executives here and paid without having heavy taxation. And I don't think that anyway, 25,000 inhabitants in the Principality, I don't think that can make much difference in any national taxation system.
There are 500 or 600 British residents here. Many of them are retired people living on pensions, so they tend to be an elderly community. One of them, a retired colonel, cleared up one point for me straight away.
What do you say to people who call you a tax dodger?
Well, now, tax, that's rather a sore point. We are not tax dodgers. For instance, I pay nearly half my retired pay income tax in Great Britain. It's true I get a very small return from income which I obtain from stocks and shares domiciled out of Great Britain, but it's a very, very small part of my income. I'm almost might say I pay for English income tax.
What do the British people here feel about the dispute of France with Prince Rainier? Are they of one accord?
I think we are, and I think I may safely speak for the British community. We're all solid behind the Prince.
Afraid of the growing threat of Americanization on the purity of French culture, de Gaulle was very resentful that those closest to Prince Rainier were all Americans. From his American Princess Grace to her American secretary, Phyllis Blum, to their American chaplain, Father Tucker. The message was clear: pay French taxes or lose French protection. De Gaulle organized a blockade of Monaco, cutting the Principality off from mainland France. However, something more sinister was taking up the spotlight.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
With the world's media focused on the growing tensions of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the press reduced the crisis in Monaco to an issue about taxes for the super rich. What they blatantly ignored was the fact that France was threatening to take over a sovereign nation, putting the very existence of Monaco into doubt. Following months of negotiations between Prince Rainier III and Charles de Gaulle, an agreement was finally reached on the 18th of May, 1963. With help from Grace, Prince Rainier agreed on French citizens with less than 5 years of residence in Monaco and companies doing more than 25% of their business outside the country would be taxed at French rates. a compromise which would help preserve the principality's image as a luxury holiday destination, something which Grace had heavily contributed to. It is rumored that Grace's insistence on only speaking French to Charles de Gaulle may have contributed to the compromise. Grace's determination to integrate into Monaco society saw her attempting to speak French from the outset, giving her first full French interview in 1959.
Oui, les transitions sont toujours difficiles. Et pour moi, il y avait peut-être plusieurs transitions à faire, c'est-à-dire d'une vie célibataire, d'une femme mariée. Au point de vue de changement de pays et d'une langue. Et
following the end of her film career, Kelly performed her daily duties as a royal princess and became involved in philanthropic work. As princess consort, she served as president of the Garden Club of Monaco, president of the Red Cross of Monaco, and president of the organizing committee of the International Arts Foundation. Kelly loved flowers, a passion that began in her hometown of Philadelphia and bloomed throughout her life. Kelly was an established expert on flowers and conducted classes on floral arrangements. In 1968, her love of flowers led her to establish the Garden Club of Monaco. Kelly mirrored the majesty of a lily, the brilliance of a rose, and the elegance of an orchid. Respect and passion for flowers were anchored in her heart. Since retiring as an actress, Kelly rechanneled her creativity in creating pressed flower collages. Her knowledge of flowers soon evolved, and she was soon designing and making pressed flower arrangements. Some of her collages were exhibited at the Galerie Dormant in Paris in 1977 and 1980, and a few of her designs were featured on Monaco's postage stamps during the 1970s. In 1980, she co-wrote My Book of Flowers, where she shared her simple techniques for flower pressing and her love of flowers. It is rumored that she received some 200,000 orchids from all around the world at the birth of her son, Albert. The royal couple had 3 children, their firstborn, Princess Caroline, their next child and heir to the throne, Prince Albert, and the youngest child, Princess Stephanie.
Going all out to herald the arrival of Princess Caroline, firstborn of Prince Rainier and his American princess. Cold wars and international politics were forgotten in a day of celebration and thanksgiving. Flowers for the world's newest princess, whose proud father signed the official register of her birth, and then, still shaky from the ordeal of becoming a parent, took his own movies for posterity. The pictures were out of focus, but Monaco could forgive a nervous father. It was too busy drinking a toast to the newcomer up on the hill.
When Kelly was pregnant with her daughter Caroline, she often covered her belly with a purse so that the paparazzi couldn't snap photos. The luxurious company that made the bag, Hermes, wound up renaming the princess's tote in her honor. It is now known as the famous and highly coveted Kelly bag. Although Kelly gave up her acting career after becoming a royal, she didn't completely abandon the arts. Instead, she became a great patron of the arts in Monaco. The former actress brought arts and culture to Monaco while also quietly supporting countless American performing and film artists.
She had that desire to help young artists, young emerging artists, and in the performing arts, and so that's exactly what we did. She didn't have time to set up the foundation in her lifetime. She was busy with other charities and other foundations, and there is also a Princess Grace Foundation Monaco, which helps the dance school and other artists, mostly in painting and sculpture, but really the performing arts in this country, I think she was very keen on.
The classic Hitchcock film, To Catch a Thief, features a famous scene in which Kelly's character Francis drives Cary Grant's John Robbie around the French Riviera. When the film premiered, viewers celebrated the scene for its tension and beauty as Kelly navigates the winding cliffsides of the Riviera at high speed.
Cary Grant and this year's Academy Award winner Grace Kelly, two exciting personalities who were made for each other. And now Alfred Hitchcock brings them into very close contact in this perfect tale of romantic intrigue, filmed on the beautiful French Riviera.
However, the scene would take on new meaning when on the 13th of September, 1982, tragedy struck. Whilst Princess Grace and her youngest daughter Stephanie were driving along the steep cliffs of the Côte d'Azur region of southern France, the same area where she filmed the iconic scene, Kelly suffered a stroke and lost control of the vehicle, which spun off the cliff's edge and plunged down a 45-foot embankment. Mother and daughter were rushed to hospital where Princess Grace spent 24 hours in a coma before being taken off life support at the age of 52. On September 18, 1982, heads of state, celebrities, royals, an estimated 26,000 people, and close to 100 million television viewers paid their respects to Kelly on the day of her funeral. Among those who attended were Cary Grant, Nancy Reagan, and Princess Diana. The princess, who didn't have a single crowned head attend her wedding, was now respected by royal dynasties the world over. The final resting place of Her Serene Highness is the same cathedral in which she had her fairy tale wedding in 1956. The cathedral's steps were covered in flowers, and its bell tolled slowly. The coffin was placed outside the cathedral, and as some of the 800 mourners took seats inside, the prince and his children stood next to the coffin, their grief stark in the sunlight. Kelly was buried in the royal family's vault following the funeral, which featured a eulogy by fellow actor James Stewart. I just love Grace Kelly, not because she was a princess, not because she was an actress, not because she was my friend, but because she was just about the nicest lady I ever met. Roses were Kelly's favorite flower, and in 1984, to honor her, Prince Rainier inaugurated a public rose garden dedicated to her memory. The fragrant garden is home to more than 4,000 roses. Monaco continues to honor the princess through ballets in her memory, libraries named after her, as well as hotels establishing suites inspired by her life and likeness. Kelly also appeared on a U.S. postage stamp in 1993, which was released in conjunction with a Monaco postage stamp featuring her image on the same day. Leaving a lasting legacy as a theater artist, television actress, and iconic Hollywood star, Kelly's life would go on to inspire millions around the world, transforming herself from a young stage actress to a household name. The Hollywood starlet who became Monaco's beloved princess against all odds. Her on-screen beauty, self-confidence, and mystery enchanted the world, and her serenity and poise as a princess defined royalty and grace. She will be forever remembered for her contribution to the world of cinema and her unrelenting charitable efforts. Often cited as one of the most elegant women in cinematic and world history, with pure intentions and a charitable heart. After all these years, it seems like one of her wishes has been granted by history. I would like to be remembered as someone who accomplished useful deeds and who was a kind and loving person. I would like to leave the memory of a human being with a correct attitude and who did her best to help others. Grace Kelly, Her Serene Highness, Princess Grace of Monaco.